I love cookies. I love cookies. I love cookies. I love cookies.
Welcome to Cookies, the world's most influential basketball podcast. I am Ben Dietrich. Jordan Rodelli is on vacation, but Andrew Kuo does not take days off. Mr. Andrew Kuo, how are you doing, buddy?
Incredible. I got all my fall drip on. I feel like my brain is back in school. Just phenomenal, man. How you feeling?
I'm feeling pretty good. What drip have you brought out from the
Thank you
drip
for
trove?
asking. Woo. I brought out some crispy white sweatshirts, fresh out of the package. And I'm wearing some sweatpants made by an underground brand called 555 Soul. Got some socks on. It's pretty. I got those tube socks on. It's really going off over here, man.
I'm wearing a Cookies Hoops crew neck that has basketball embroidered upon the left breast, and let me tell you, it is a statement piece.
I just wanted to let my sweatshirt do the talking for me. And that talking is some basketball talk, man.
My statement piece is basketball. We're going to have some more crew necks on the way. They're going to be released first for our sweet Patreons, but they'll be coming out in a few days. So get those while they're hot, because they are seasonally appropriate.
As well as a bevy of hats that our Patreon subscribers can get their dirty mitts on before anyone else.
God, life is sweet for the Patreon subscriber.
They're just getting all the drip that isn't making it to our shop.
Just incredible drip options for those Patreons.
Diverting the drip right into their wardrobe, man.
Just midstream, the drip is shunted from the general population over to the Patreon subscriber. What a time to be alive. And other time to be alive news. You know who died? Your girl RBG, the notorious, the nefarious, the infamous RBG, has passed away. And as tragic as that is, there are other complications of her demise. Namely, the Republicans are going to force feed us a Supreme Court nominee over the next couple weeks. So with all due respect to her and her accomplishments and her life, we're looking at a thorny situation here coming down the last couple months before the November election.
Yeah, and it's kind of so odd feeling because things are so fast feeling these days that it's hard to pause and recognize. It's not hard, but we're not doing enough pausing maybe to recognize one of the great Americans in the history of this country. And she had done so much in her life, and to have it go down like this is like, it sort of reminds me of when John McCain died. It's like, oh, there's a lot to talk about with this person, you know, like you can come at it from many angles, but this person lived a very, very full life. But we're just going to talk about something else, which is very, in my opinion, like not as pleasant, which is the procedural aspects of this death.
So you're saying that you don't trust the procedure here?
No, I very much, I trusted too much. Yeah, that was, I don't even know, but let me think about this.
Are you saying the Supreme Court is rebuilding?
Are you saying Gordon Hayward is putting on that white wig?
I am saying that.
Yeah, man, I mean, how do we remember somebody like Ruth Bader Ginsburg? And talk about the immediate, the present. You know, Michael Jordan told us to live in the present, live in the moment. So we're doing that. But looking back and doing that at the same time is kind of a juggling thing.
Well, it goes without saying that had she stepped down during the Obama administration, the conversation around her death would be very different. And this isn't trying to relitigate that obvious error. It's an undebatable error. That was a foolish move. And hey, she almost survived it out, but she didn't, you know. But beyond that conversation, which is old news, we can't talk about her life and her accomplishments and her failings right now because it's not the real story. The real story is, what does this mean for the Supreme Court? We can't sit here and do a detailed sort of analysis. And on one hand, she did this. On the other hand, she voted against Native American rights over here. We can't do that right now because her death is actually secondary to the effect of her death. Mm-hmm. So that's also sad because not only is her death politically disadvantageous for the country and specifically for the Democratic Party and for people who believe in, say, abortion rights, but it is now an impediment to giving a frank and honest discussion of her legacy. Mm-hmm. But we're going to get a Supreme Court justice rammed down our throat. I don't see any way around it.
I do feel like a skill is talking about or thinking about always the right thing. And I understand why everyone's really fighting the idea that they're going to contradict themselves and get a Supreme Court nominee in under the wire, Indiana Jones style, where they impeded Merrick Garland's vote on the floor. But they have the majority, so they can do what they want, and they're gonna do this because they can. And I think I always say this almost annoyingly because you hear that beeping. I'm backing up constantly to previous pods. I'm just going back to my old takes, but chasing hypocrisy is frustrating because it always leads to more of it, and we just have to see what the rules of the game are. Like, I kind of, since this is a basketball pod, imagine prepping for a game against a team that wants to slam dunk on you every possession. You're like, okay guys, they're going to try to slam dunk on us every possession, but that's not really the right way to play because you have to share the ball, you have to be a team. So not the same player has to a different player has to contribute for their team. So we have to game plan them being honest to the game. That doesn't happen. Good teams just slam and jam, right? And the Senate is slamming and jamming, and I think we just really have to vote the fuck out of everything in November.
I agree. You know, trying to pin down the Republicans for hypocrisy, trying to windmill on them with screenshotted tweets.
Yeah.
Get out of here, man.
Yeah.
They gave us a reason because they felt like there needed to be a reason attached. It wasn't actual belief. It was because they could.
Yeah.
They could prevent Merrick Garland from getting voted on. So they did.
Yeah.
And they gave us a reason. And I say us. I mean, they gave other people a reason. They supplied us, the public, with a reason. And now they're like, well, yeah, whatever. We can do this. We don't have to abide by our reason before. And I get it. And I would hope that the Democrats would do the same thing if it was the shoe on the other foot. But the Democrats generally don't because they have a plausible deniability for their ineptitude, which is we are decent. And these guys are hypocrites and they're immoral and they're waging total war against us while we're just trying to do good government.
Yeah. And
it's a built-in excuse for not doing a good job, for saying that we're playing by the rules. But James Harden over there, he keeps just drawing fouls and he's making 4-point plays. It's bullshit. You know, he's not playing this the right way. Of course the Republicans stopped a nominee when they could. Of course they're going to force one down our throat when they can. No shit. I would expect 100% the same thing from the Democratic Party if they weren't too fearful of behaving like that.
Yeah, and it's almost just who is the loudest. And then Republicans in situations like these, tend to be louder because there is the alternate take that the Democrats are being hypocrites because they were trying to push through Merrick Garland. You know, you can argue like 50 days versus 300 days. It's just,
I mean, they're not even comparable. The election's already started.
it's wild.
I mean,
and-
there's early voting going on. It's begun. It's not even that it's before the election. It's during the election.
Yeah, I mean, just for the record, I think they should pause this nomination, but I am not surprised that they aren't because they shouldn't. And if you were a Republican or a conservative, you would want this, and it is within the realm of the rules. So it's another L if you're not into your boy Mitch McConnell.
Well, the thing here to remember is that our government is so deeply fucked. It's so incredibly garbage in virtually every respect that this is just another product of failures at every single component, from executive to legislature to judicial. It's just a farce. We have a president who has millions of fewer votes than the person that he beat. We have an electoral college that makes no sense. We have a Senate that puts New York and California on par with the Dakotas. We have a House of Representatives that is, racked by jerry-rigging. The whole thing is a joke. The Supreme Court shouldn't exist. Lifelong appointments that are basically put in by the party who happens to be in power when somebody dies or retires. The whole thing is garbage. It makes no sense at all. So for us to sit here and complain and say, "Oh, this is unfair," the whole shit's unfair. The whole thing is terrible. It is designed in a way that is deeply, deeply flawed. And you are now looking at a situation where you have a party that is extremist and is generally fairly unpopular comparatively in terms of ideas and gets less votes than the other, that is going to have some power in the Supreme Court for generations, that is going to have a advantage in the Senate almost, by a 50% but by, over 50% at least, probably for quite some time, despite the fact that they aren't as popular. Like, the whole shit's broken, man.
I hate the electoral. I hate the fact, no disrespect to your boy Tyler Harrow, no disrespect to my boy Kevin Knox. I don't know why Kentucky has so much power in our country. Respect to Kentucky, man. They are a part of our country that I love so much. But they command a lot of influence in lawmaking that I sort of want to pause a little bit and be like, can we restructure this where, Mitch McConnell is a very powerful politician who's worked his way up. Can we not let that happen next time? Like, can we do things now? I was kind of thinking the other day about, I think the common take is a common take would be lifelong appointees to a job is a bad idea. And it's a kind of an anti-tenure idea. I'm growing doubtful of that a little bit. And I'm not saying the Supreme Court should have lifetime tenures, but maybe they should, because I think people make mistakes and are incentivized in bad ways when they have to prove a point, when they're worried about their job. It's like job security in coaching or GMing. And this really relies heavily on the application process and the vetting process. And it's important to put somebody in a position where they can't lose their job, who is qualified to behave themselves.
Yeah,
And
I think it's obscene, because inevitably you're going to have people who are old as dirt.
this is the problem, right? Like, I think Ruth Bader Ginsburg was really an amazing American, but got a little older than we would prefer somebody who holds that very, very powerful, influential position. I mean, respect to her, she lived a long life, but we see politicians who have to run for office being incentivized in awful ways, and to see the Supreme Court kind of brought down to that level is, I don't think, ideal.
RBG was 87 years old. Who the fuck thinks an 87-year-old should be making rules? That's insane. That's fully insane. Not to be ageist here, but 87-year-olds making rules about how Americans are supposed to live? Hell no.
Listen, man. Buddy Hield still has something left in the tank. I think he can knock down a couple of threes a game. You get this elder slander out of here.
87-year-olds deciding how Zoomers are going to live for the next 30 years. Oh, yeah, I should get 100-year influence. Get out of here, man.
I mean, I would really... I want to know what someone who's 87 would think about Amazon and their catch and kill kind of business plan. Like, how do they talk about cloud servicing and proprietary information? Like,
they're just there babbling about the need to shoot corner threes.
I mean, credit to them.
They didn't understand basketball geniuses.
They've moved on from wanting it more because who thinks like that anymore? And now they're like, it's all spacing. They lost because of bad spacing, and they won because of good spacing. But right, like, I can't even really comprehend 18-year-old rappers anymore, and I'm dusty. But like, how is someone who's 90, pushing 90, going to talk about TikTok and the proprietary algorithm of TikTok, and if it's constitutional to take that away from its creator?
And it's also just your mental faculties when you're close to death. Like, no one who's 87 is as sharp as they were when they were 35.
There's no way.
There's just no way. The body degenerates. It's not your fault.
And it's a beautiful thing. You should chill with some Newman's Ice Lemonade and watch
Matlock.
A baseball game. And Matlock and Murder, She Wrote, and Angela Lansbury is your king now. But it's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, watch some Golden Girls. Scream about how Ben Simmons needs to shoot threes. Like, enjoy, like, you know, your golden years of your life.
Order those tactical sunglasses and drag Paul George. This is your right as someone who's made it this long.
Yeah, figure out how to grill. Tell Ben Simmons tell Joel Embiid to get his ass in the paint.
Yo, there's military grade flashlights you can obtain, and James Dolan is the problem.
Yeah, why did RBG just do that?
I mean, it's a tough thing, and you know, we side a certain way, and we just have to lick our wounds. And November has to be a strong moment for somebody, and hopefully it's people like us. You know, like. Fuck, man. It's so. What can we do? There's people on Twitter who are like,
hold on. Before we go to that, before we go to what can we do, because that's a good conversation. But I want to say this though. You know, we have a month and a half left before the election. There's a decent chance this is a month and a half left of normalcy for a while. I think we should enjoy it. Get out there, see some friends, have a little al fresco.
Give yourself the
wine.
Flowers now, man.
You know, like the weather's nice. Get out there, go for a hike. Get the All Trails app. Because there's a good chance that Donald Trump refuses to acknowledge the results of the election, which are going to be weird due to the fact that there's early voting, there's in-person voting, there's mail-in voting, that there's going to be a lot of moving parts, which will lead to some confusion, which will lead to an ability to declare himself the winner at some point. And with the likelihood being that he will have put another person in the Supreme Court, that it will go to the Supreme Court, who will then say, in the same way they did it with George Bush, that he is in fact the president. I don't think that's out of the realm of possibility. I think it's probable. I mean, like, what are doing odds here? I think that's a coin toss.
Yeah, I think anybody who says definitively they know what's going to happen is guessing. It's Gestradamus stuff. My guess is Trump is going to get whooped. I've stood by this for years. It's not a strong take at this point. It's going to break even. But you're right. I think the probable thing that will happen is litigation. endless litigation, and Mitch McConnell will have his seat. And that is not looking good for Biden-Harris, the Biden-Harris side. But
I like literally just forgot that was actually who was opposing him. Like, oh right, it's Biden and Harris. Great, great, very strong, very strong.
thanks, guys. Thank you. 77 years young. But
Biden will go out there and give some barn-burning speech that'll get us out in the streets, and democracy will prevail.
I personally, Gestradamus over here, in my Gestradamus voice, I think Biden's going to do fine. I don't think there's a silent majority anywhere. No one can find it. Whatever. Polling is polling. It's really weird. It's going to break even no matter what. Let's brace ourselves, man.
I agree. I think Biden's going to win the election.
Yep.
Numerically, I think he'll win it by the Electoral College. I mean, the polls are what they are. I'm trying to sort of opt out of the horse race, but I'm cognizant enough of what the poll numbers are to say it looks like Biden is going to win easily.
Yep.
By the Electoral College, by the popular vote, etc. But I also do think there's a reasonably good chance that
It will be stolen.
Donald Trump is not going to say, okay, cool, I lost, I'm out. That he will bitch and moan, and that the Republicans will take up that clarion call to contest the election, and it will go to the Supreme Court. I think that's very much on the table. And again, I'm not going to say it's 100%, but when is Donald Trump acknowledged an L?
Yeah, he loves litigation. He loves lawyers. He loves running it back. And
Well, when does he ever acknowledge, I lost? Never. He couldn't even acknowledge that he got fewer people at his inauguration. He can't acknowledge an L.
Yeah.
That he would do it right now and say, it's true, I lost to Joe Biden, I'm out.
Yeah.
It really comes down to the structures around Donald Trump, which we have learned, unfortunately, are very fragile.
Well, when people don't show up to his rally, he didn't say he took an L. That wouldn't benefit him at all, but he's trying to dismantle a company because he took that L. TikTok, right? And I think he recognizes, just the other day he said, regarding coronavirus, when he was A+, right before he gave himself a perfect grade as we top 200,000 deaths in America, which is mind-boggling. He said he maybe got a D in public relations or media, and he kind of admitted that. I just don't care what he says. It sucks because November's coming, and this is fascinating, but I'm deeply troubled and stressed out by it, so I have to opt out to a degree. But this is fascinating, right?
I mean, on one hand, Donald Trump refusing to acknowledge the results of the election doesn't matter. On one hand, it doesn't matter. I disagree. Who cares? You lost. It comes down to, will the rest of the government follow his lead and say, okay, we're not going to respect the results of this. And I think after what we've seen over the last 4 years, that is probable too.
Yeah.
It's not like the Republicans have ever shied away from this. They like it. And that kind of goes back to Mitch McConnell.
Oh, yeah.
You're like, look at his hypocrisy. I'm like, no, this is what makes it delicious.
Yeah.
The fact that he just shoved it down the Democrats' face twice and just made up bullshit, and they had to just eat it. That's what makes it great. He's not embarrassed by the hypocrisy. That's what makes it fun.
Yeah.
That he was able to just exercise power twice. And this is the same deal. Do I think Mitch McConnell, as a coup de grace after this, will say, yeah, fuck it, we're actually going to just wheedle our way to staying in power? Of course I believe he'll do that.
Yeah.
Of course he will. Why would he not?
Yeah.
What on earth has he ever shown to make us believe that this would not be another ultimate success for him, to actually circumvent democracy and the vote itself in order to stay in power? Of course he will.
I think it's a human condition to change your mind, and whether that is hypocritical or not is up to someone to decide. But it's sort of like when people relitigate the process, and they're like,
yeah, but with him, it's not about him changing his mind. He was going to do what he was able to do both times and then give lip service to whatever position he was going to take. This wasn't about him thinking it was right and then being like, upon second thought, maybe I will do it this way.
I'm talking about a worldview of it.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
When we talk about, McConnell's going to do whatever he wants to do.
Yeah, that's all I'm saying.
But you know, when we talk about, or when people talk about the process and say that wasn't the right way to do it, and you don't have a championship because it's karmic. I'm like, all of those things are just feelings. They don't make sense because you do what you have to do, and there's strategies in order to obtain a result that you want. And McConnell is just doing that. And to say he didn't do it ethically is probably correct, but also he does not give a fuck. He's opted out of the concerns that you have.
I don't really understand what motivates him particularly. And
Man, yeah.
I don't know if he's a religious person. I don't know if he has any core belief system. I don't know if he's a bad person. I just don't know at all.
Did you listen to that podcast? It was maybe 2 years ago. There was a McConnell podcast that was kind of hot stuff, and it just went through his life and what he was like as a person. So I'm sorry to interrupt you, but
no, go on. I'm genuinely curious and trying to determine what his motivations are, other than just grasping at power for its own sake.
That was his motivation. The way the pod framed it, like when he ran, he was always interested in power. So even in high school, he ran for student body president or whatever title they were offering. And he would just find the most popular people who were popular, and he was unpopular, not a surprise. And he would just bend to what they wanted, so he would get their vote. And I believe there was an instance in high school where he just flipped his position to a way to obtain that seat. And his goal is always to obtain the seat by any means necessary. And that is just reading the room and finding where the majority is. And that is a skill, and there's a genius there that I don't deny. I don't know or are friends with many people who behave that way, but that is some Cobra Commander, Megatron stuff that is a part of our world.
I mean, there's an element of sadness there, and I don't mean this in any sympathy for Mitch McConnell, but that someone who is talented and someone who is smart and someone who is highly ambitious chose to use those attributes in this way that led to the highest points of power in the United States government in pursuit of garbage, in pursuit of absolute trash, like making people's lives significantly worse via your climb into, arguably the most powerful person in America right now, other than the president. And
in the world, yeah.
Yeah, in the world. And you're using that to take people's health care away. There's something so utterly pathetic about that as your entire life's work.
I
think what a squandering of political instincts and intuition and drive.
I think in a powers of 10 way, if you pull back from that sadness, the sadness is like we are just not on the same page as humans, because I definitely believe him and his camp think that they are doing the right thing, and they're mandated by a power that they're executing on Earth. And me and you disagree with that, and I think that is the melancholy.
I don't know. I can't even describe moral relativism to the current Republican Party. It just doesn't even track. I don't think it's anything except for we're going to do what we want in the harshest of capitalistic senses, in the same way that a business will do everything it can if you don't stop them. The Republican Party is basically just operating under that same principles. We will take and take and take and push and push and push and eat and eat and eat until you stop us. And if you can't stop us, we're just going to keep doing it.
I was giggling in front of my laptop yesterday when Bill Barr called New York City an anarchist state. And I was like, oh, that's funny, because I'm sure a lot of people believe him and think that we look like Judgment Night, the movie, where there's burning trash cans, which wasn't New York, but the perception of New York is burning trash cans with gangs with leather jackets and cut off denim vests or whatever,
Just looks like Rumble in the Bronx.
Yeah, and I was giggling because, of course, that's not the case. It's beautiful in New York, and we definitely need help, and they want to deny us that help because we are an anarchist state. But I'm like, a city. There is anarchy, and it's in Wall Street. And go after all the crime there. Not to sound like it's such a slam dunk that the anarchy you're looking for is in white collar crime. It's not in bars trying to stay alive and breaking a rule by, or it's not somebody who gets angry at law enforcement and responds, in my opinion, a very human way.
Sure, but they don't care about that, just as
No,
they don't
no.
care about the supposed anarchy in New York State or Portland or Minnesota or wherever the hell they're trying to pretend there's
Seattle.
anarchy.
It's Seattle, Portland, and New York.
They know there's no anarchy there. They know there's no anarchy in New York. They know it. It's bullshit. They know it. I mean, there's no motivation here towards improving society. There's nothing. Yeah. It's funny. I was watching Mississippi Burning.
A
couple days ago.
A casual, just
Chill,
perusing through
chill.
your channels, just put that on.
It's remarkable to hear the politicians using the exact same verbiage. What about Chicago?
Yeah.
Oh, outside agitators. It's the same thing. We never really moved past the 60s. We thought we did. In school, we learned about Martin Luther King and how he more or less ended racism. I mean, that was how it was taught in American schools. And it's clear we barely moved past slavery, let alone the 1960s. All this stuff is exactly the same. The talk about outside agitators, the police brutality, protest in the streets. It's all the same shit, man.
It's veering towards a Kanye take. And I agree with you. And I was thinking the other day that the reason I wear sweatshirts and 555 sole pants is I never quite grew up. Mentally, I consider myself a child. Emotionally, I consider myself a child. And I am not good at grasping concepts that I thought adults could grasp. It's something I have trouble with. And I think it's because as a kid, I thought adults were smart and good at what they do and responsible. And when I aged into adulthood, none of that was apparent to me. So there was no reason for me to acquire those skills. And I was thinking about the other day, like the Chinese Exclusion Act in America, where they wouldn't let a lot of Chinese Americans who were brought over as slaves to build things become citizens and own businesses and property. And that rings a lot like the foreign policy Trump is talking about now. And I'm like, do we just repeat ourselves endlessly, or do things get better and change? And I choose to think that things get better, but it's kind of hard to prove it when you dig deep enough. And I think it's like a chart that goes up, and it goes up in a 45-degree angle, let's say, better or worse, whatever metric you want to apply to it. But if you zoom in close enough, it's a jagged line. And I think, in my opinion, we're at a low, but when we pull away, I think the arc is still on its trajectory.
I think to some extent that's true, but certainly not in America for the most part.
We're crashing a little bit.
Well, I mean, you just look at the power of labor, how it's been wildly diminished. You look at the amount of money and resources that have gone funneled from the majority of Americans into the hands of a tiny, tiny, tiny few. You look at the social programs, how they've been pared back or dismantled or killed. There's no way you can look at America today and say America is better than it was 20 years ago in terms of what it supplies. There may be changes in the way that people think, but I don't know, dude. Like watching Mississippi Burning and seeing, the scenes where they had a politician, yelling about segregation, and seeing like them cut to the crowd and how exactly the same it is when they cut to the crowd in a Trump rally with everyone in their MAGA hats. It was hard not to just see that and be like, what are we talking about, man? We haven't moved an inch.
Which is fascinating because you're watching a movie directed by somebody. It's such an interesting idea you brought up. I want to talk about The Crown eventually when season 4 comes back, but I think you're right. I do believe in my heart, and I'm not just even saying this, that BLM is working. I think that it has shifted something substantial. And I do believe we're in a different point 20 years ago. It worked, in my opinion. Did it work enough? Hell's no. But I think that paradigm has shifted, and I just have to believe that. Things matter. That's all.
I think there's two different things here, and one of them is that I do think the perception of the typical American has changed. I think if you asked people in the 1960s what their beliefs were on black people, on gay people, on civil rights, I think they would have been far, far, far more conservative than they are today. I also think that the country of America, due to circumstances, and the government itself, does not look very different at all. And the policies, and you see, the DeSantis in Florida trying to more or less make protest illegal, but it's okay if you drive through protesters with your car. Yeah. And you're like, this is surreal, man. This is just like, you can't say this isn't advance over anything that happened, when Abby Hoffman and the Weather Underground and the Black Panthers were protesting, and they murdered Black Panthers. Like, this is all kind of the same shit.
I mean, I think in a snapshot, 100 years is not a long time. The biggest shift I think we'll see that will shock me in our lifetime is like possibly Texas turning blue, which might happen, which would shock me, but it's on the table. And through immigration, through citizenship, and Trump knows this, and conservatives know this, or Republicans know this. But I do believe. I see your point. I think a snapshot of 50 years is quick.
I'm with you, and I'm not even a pessimist. I'm more or less an optimist. I think people's beliefs have changed. It's just eerie how similar this MAGA movement is to the 1960s, and how it is solely based in white resentment, specifically white male resentment. And that's all MAGA is. There's nothing else to it. Yeah. It's white male resentment, which funnels towards like white female resentment. Yeah. That's it. And they're being rewarded for the math, which is if you can get the majority of white women, the overwhelming majority of white men, and like a few other people who are willing to vote for you, you can win the electoral college. And that's the math, and that's why they're doubling down on it.
This is such like like a weird 90s idea, like some weird Aronofsky pie idea. But, I do think 2016 was a coin flip. Hillary won, and then the Republicans did stuff where Hillary lost. And I think it was so close. And it could have gone either way. And things have progressed since then, because 4 years, is a period of time where you could be exposed to something like a movement like MAGA or Q. But if Hillary had won, which I think she did, we wouldn't be talking about the same things, but they would still exist in some way. It's like Anthony Davis hitting that last second shot.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's totally true. America did not fundamentally shift from Obama's America to Trump's America. And I think that's kind of what I was trying to get at. It's like the government has changed, and it's all the same stuff that appeals to those same things. But you are correct. And that under Obama, it felt as if we were moving towards the future, and it was progressive, more progressive than it really was. And in Trump, we look at that government and look at his supporters and say, this is what America is like. And in reality, it's neither.
Yeah, true. Yes,
that's
right?
I think you're correct on that.
It's the way you look at a series, like the Lakers are up 2-0. But it's 1-1, and the Lakers are going to win, and they're going to win the championship, and Jokic had them. And this is all very complicated stuff. And the way we look at results and the way we look at our present and reality, that's why I really bristled against The Last Dance. I don't think being in the moment is necessarily an asset. I think the smartest people can do all three things, look in the future, present, and past. Not to sound hyperbolic, but you can walk and chew gum. And Michael Jordan, being a unitasker in his philosophy, made him a great person or athlete. But to me, I think we demand a different criteria from our politicians.
Fair point. You mentioned the Lakers Nuggets series. Let's talk about that a little bit.
Basketball.
Kind of to your exact point was that was a series that was 1-0 and came down to the final seconds in Game 2, and was an unsatisfying result for those of us who want to see competitive basketball. Because though that game was great and it featured some ludicrous shot making by Anthony Davis down the stretch, as well as by Jokic, the end result takes us away from a competitive series.
Yeah, it was disappointing. Not because I am a self-admitted, I think the Lakers are the villain here, but 1-1 would have been much more fun for everybody.
Yeah, exactly. That was where I was at. I don't have any strong feelings about the Nuggets. I really like Jokic. I like Jeremy Grant. I think Murray is a sort of frustratingly talented guy. But
Your boy Millsap.
Love Millsap. But I also don't really want to see them win. I would like to see a good series, but I don't really want to see the Nuggets in the finals.
Oh, get out of here. The trophy was meant to be hoisted by those jiggly, toneless arms of our king, Nikola Jokic.
I mean, that would be cool and all. But I just do.
I love him.
I've just had it with this starless basketball. I mean, no, he's a legit star.
He's a legit star.
No, he's awesome.
He is just about my favorite thing in entertainment right now. I love him so much, and I like his life point of view as far as we know, with old pictures of him and what he says after and before games. I really like him, and he is so talented, and he kind of performs in the face of all these grill mastery takes, and I'm really rooting for him to do it. When this bubble started, I thought it made most sense that LeBron would have a platform where he would win it all, and I love adding another ring to his war chest to create more chaos in the debate of him versus Jordan.
I mean, that's my only agenda, really.
Yeah, he is better than
I
Jordan.
like LeBron. I think he's the best player of all time. So having him win, as long as it's going against teams like Miami or the Celtics, is fine with me.
Yeah, and Lakers Twitter is powerful enough, and Lakers media, they're not as powerful as the BMM, but if Jokic wins the bub, it's going to be a quirky experiment. If the Lakers win, it is going to be a triumph never seen by the NBA.
Is there really an LAMM though? I don't think there is. I think there's Lakers Twitter, but I don't think they have any media voice, and that's why the BMM stomps them out repeatedly.
On ESPN, there used to be more LAMM, but it's kind of it's mostly Boston now, as we know. But
for example, would you say that on the conventional list of GOATs, that Larry Bird at this point usually goes above Kareem and Magic?
No, I don't think he does. I think he rests around generously 8 or 9, right?
I think those are all reasonable, but I do feel as if Bird has sort of moved past Magic in the ideas of just because of the BMM.
That's crazy.
So here's the thing, right? I was tweeting about this the other day. If Kawhi Leonard ends up winning a ring last year, this season, if he wins one going forward, whatever, what's the argument that Larry Bird is ahead of Kawhi Leonard on the top 10 list?
It always comes back to that era was tougher and better. But we
know it's not.
Oh, but we know LeBron is better than Jordan, yet we're still in this fight, right? I think it just comes back to era because there's no denying someone's memory. It's I remembered it. I was there. They were tougher. Look at pictures of Kevin McHale. Tougher.
Right. Of course, it comes down to because I feel that way.
Yep.
But it's mostly okay, if you care about rings and Kawhi wins 3 and Bird has 3, what's the argument for Bird? What is it? We know Kawhi is a much better defensive player, won Defensive Player of the Year twice. That Larry Bird was not a great defensive player.
Played in a tougher era. And
I just think it's tough. And you could be like, well, Larry Bird, does he score more? No, not really.
on the cookies,
Is he a better shooter? No.
on the cookies top
Better
list,
passer.
like Wade is better than Bird, right? Like Wade has 3.
Yeah, I think it's tough. I think the Kawhi is a weird one. He has no real fans, no passionate supporters. But I do think the LA media is really weak. I think New York media would be okay, except the Knicks are just so dismal for the last 20 years.
Yeah. Carrie Champion was a big LA supporter on ESPN in the highest places like Sports Center, but she's not there anymore. So I used to get a lot of like that's where Clips Gone Clip came from. When they blew that series versus Houston, she was all over TV doing that, which was amazing. But
Because remember, we had a lot of Bulls media when Jordan was around.
yeah, Mike Wilbon was still on TV.
And then you had Knicks, Lakers guys who came up because those teams were really relevant.
I'm sorry, you said Knicks, and I
Pre-relegation.
just love that team so much.
But there were Knicks fans in the media as well. But
Oh,
now
yeah.
it's so overly whelming Boston. Overwhelming. It's absolutely crazy how overwhelming it is.
They Mitch McConnell this shit, man. They
did.
behind the scenes, their tiny green hand got into every room. They had their tiny little green thumbprints on every take.
But you're being hypocritical. No, we can.
Yeah, I mean, respect to the BMM, man. They have a genius that I don't really love, but it exists.
I mean, in your opinion, are the takedowns on Paul George tied to the Beantown Media Mafia? Do you see it? Is the little green hand leaving its fingerprints all over the Paul George hindquarters?
To back up a little leprechaun step, the step back leprechaun move here. Paul George has been dogged for having a rough series. We forget that he told us he wasn't feeling well, whatever. We talked about that already previously on Cookies. And then it came out recently that he had spoken to his team after they were defeated by a superior team in the Nuggets. And he had implored his teammates to run it back. He's like, we still got the guys. Everyone, let's come back and try it again. I think he's right. I think that team can win a ring at any point. They just ran into a much better carb-on-carb player. And people allegedly rolled their eyes, when Paul George made that plea and that request. And, it could come from a lot of reasons. It could be, I want to get paid, I'm not getting enough minutes, or, of course, we're going to run it back. This team is amazing. But the media interpreted it as he had lost confidence in his teammates. And I think that was a BMM manufactured take.
Why do you blame this on the nefarious BMM?
I think there's certain guys that the BMM will never turn on. And one of those, obviously, Paul Pierce, obviously now Kendrick Perkins, and I think Doc Rivers. And Doc Rivers is their guy, Kevin Garnett. And he won a championship for them. He came true to his promise as a leprechaun. He put on that green top hat and found the pot of gold. And I think their allegiance with him runs deep. And there's some little drama between Paul George and the Rivers family. This is my far-fetched take. But, Paul George had a very serious relationship with Doc Rivers' daughter, who's NBA royalty, as she should be. The Rivers family carries a bit of weight. And he stepped out on her with a dancer who he has a wonderful family with now. 2 kids, I believe. He misses them. He talks about how he misses them. Like, they are a happy American family. And I think the BMM still gets a little upset that he had done the royalty dirty. That's my take.
I think you could even extend this conspiracy
Please.
to the fact that Paul George is the most obvious archetype for what the BMM hopes that Jason Tatum can become.
Yes, I love it.
As long as Paul George is there And Paul George is obviously, clearly better than Jason Tatum. It's not even comparable.
It does a disservice to debate to compare those two.
But if we can say that Paul George, in fact, isn't as good, and it's due to that he's soft or he's weak in the clutch, we can avoid the conversation about him obviously being better at basketball, being a better defender, being a better creator on the ball, being a better passer, able
Shot
to run
creator.
pick and rolls, just better at everything,
Yes.
literally better at everything.
Agreed.
But if we can say that he's in fact soft and that his mental fortitude erodes his basketball talent, where we can pretend that Tatum, the guy who choked badly in the first two games, in fact is made of steel. We can now say, well, Tatum's better than Paul George. Paul George is a loser. Tatum's a winner. Paul George, he's a loser. And now we can start moving up our little totem pole of two-way conventional normie guards, wings. And then you've only got really Kawhi ahead of him by the BMM calculus.
Metric, right.
Because, of course, Tatum is a third-tier star. Kawhi is a first-tier star as a conventional two-way wing. Paul George is a second-tier star as a conventional two-way wing.
RJ
And
Barrett
Tatum-
is a second-tier star. Yeah, go on.
And Tatum, Kevin Knox, guys like that. Tobias Harris's, But I'm saying for real, Tatum is a third-tier star
with you. I'm
when
with
you compare him to those guys. So if you can sit here and slander Paul George enough that we knock him down a tier to Tatum's tier, now Tatum is second tier.
Yep.
I
This
see it. I know what you're doing.
It's a little state called Kentucky. We just want to be represented in the Senate is all. We want to have our voice heard.
Money Mitch.
Dunking, slamming and jamming. Yes, I think the Paul George slander, which is so odd to me. Well, not odd. He kind of coughed it up in a very loud series, but the slander that's going on is a BMM. It's a little.
The
nugget.
BMM is nothing if not crafty.
Yeah.
They use the timing of Paul George's crumbling. We talked about this last week. The joy in which they were able to talk about him fucking up and not talk about Jason Tatum going 0 for 7 in fourth quarter.
Yeah.
You could just see the desperate gleam in their eye as they rode as hard as they possibly could on Paul George so that no one would talk about the Celtics losing game 1 and Tatum shitting the bed in public in front of people.
And this is some politics stuff that we just talked about. I don't blame them for doing this because
They Friday news dump
Yeah.
the Celtics loss.
Yeah. I don't.
Much like Paul Pierce loves a good Friday news dump.
Leprechaun's gonna leprechaun, and they should. If a leprechaun stops behaving like a leprechaun, we don't know what we're looking at. So thank you,
This is a
BMM.
short guy with clogs on.
Where is the gold?
Just a guy in a little green hat.
Yeah, some are mean, some are cute, but they all are leprechauns.
So back to Lakers Nuggets.
Yes.
That was a good segue, though.
Yeah, thank you.
Or a good sidebar, if you will,
You
on the
slammed
Supreme
it in,
Court of Cookies Hoops. So after Davis's big-time three, which was the most clutch shot of his career, I guess. He's never been in
biggest
this
moment.
kind of situation before.
Stat hug.
I saw him as someone who's typically accustomed to burrowing around in a trough, looking for truffles, slopping it. This was a big moment for a stat hog. Made him look like he was concerned about more than just the empty calories of 25 and 15 performances. But I saw people saying, well, this is it. Anthony Davis is now the best player in the NBA. It's Anthony Davis's moment. Let's acknowledge his absolute greatness. Where do you stand on Anthony Davis having a claim to being the current king of New York, so to speak, in basketball?
I stand with Maria Taylor. While Anthony Davis is probably, most definitely, first team All-NBA, he is so damn forgettable, man. And I forget he exists, too. I do not blame any basketball fanatic forgetting about him because he's kind of like not a dynamic player necessarily optically. This is some dribble bias stuff. He's not a dynamic personality. He's nice. His game is amazing. He does his thing. He's been a successful stat hog for enough to get him in the Hall of Fame, and now he's on a winner on a big stage. But I still have trouble remembering him sometimes. Like, oh, right, LeBron is playing with AD. Jesus, they're unbeatable, you know? I have to remind myself every time I see them. But, respect to stat hogs. It's hard to be a stat hog, and he is one. And that puts you in a top tier. So he is there. Do I blame anyone for forgetting about him? No.
I mean, I think Anthony Davis is, he's a top 5 player. He's a top 10 player. Mm-hmm. I have trouble with the idea that someone can be the best player in the NBA if they aren't a basketball genius. Just from a personal standpoint. And that's what's always...
Let's go.
Was always stuck in my craw about Giannis. And I feel the same way about Anthony Davis.
Can I ask you some series of quick questions to support this ethical point?
Yes. Yes, you can.
What quantifies a basketball genius?
Having an otherworldly feel for the game. Having the ability to understand how players are moving around. There's a spatial acuity. And we know the guys who have that. Chris Paul, LeBron James, Simmons, Jokic.
Lonzo Ball, to a degree.
Lonzo Ball. Yeah, it alone doesn't get you there. But I even think someone like Kevin Durant.
Oh, absolutely. You kidding? The second best player of all time?
Steph Curry.
Yeah.
There's an
Kyrie
awareness, Kyrie for sure. But I'm trying to think of guys who've won MVPs lately. I mean, that pretty much covers it, right? I mean, that's your list. And Giannis just doesn't have that for me because of how he plays. He's awesome. I think he's second best, but it's hard for me to say the best basketball player on the planet doesn't really have an awesome command of like
space,
the mental
the
side of the court, of like knowing what's smart and knowing the right play. Giannis going 0 for 7, I think in game 2 or 3 from 3-point line against Miami. You're like, this is
series.
Bullshit. This is so dumb.
If Giannis just dunks, they're here.
This guy's supposed to be the best player on the planet, and he's throwing up these try-hard threes because people said that's why he missed them all year for this moment. I'm like, this is bullshit. And again, not knocking on him. It's just that if you are the best player on the planet, you shouldn't be doing that shit. That should not be part of your failures. Should not be you mentally didn't get it. And that's a bummer.
Just for debate reasons, can I throw out the idea that kind of talent is a skill? Size, he doesn't have the court vision another player has. He's a less beautiful player. He's a blunt object, as we always say. But I do think there's a talent there that you have to recognize as an apex thing that Lonzo Ball doesn't have, that Chris Paul doesn't have.
Oh, 100%. I think Giannis is the second best player on the planet. And if LeBron ceased to exist, I would still feel uncomfortable, but acknowledge that Giannis was the best. I'm like, yeah, it's true, but I don't like it. It's not my favorite thing, And that's the same deal with Anthony Davis. He's not a dumb player, but he likes cute shit. He likes fall away jumpers. He likes pull ups. He's not a great passer. He's gotten better. He used to be quite bad, and now I think he's actually fairly decent because he can handle the ball so well for a big guy.
Yeah, he was a point guard in high school, I believe.
But yeah, I just have an awkward feeling when like the GOAT doesn't have the ability to sort of, I don't know, dictate the game not only with their physical skills and physical attributes, but also their mind.
Yeah, I'm down with that. I'm no fan of brunch or bottomless mimosas, but I'm dying for KD to come back. I hope he comes back healthy. He's the antidote to a lot of this dumb rankings that we have because he embodies what I want Giannis to be. I don't know if he's ever going to get back to that level, and I want Curry back. I want all these principal elements of the league to come back, so we don't sit around and hand Giannis Antetokounmpo awards that he deserves, you know, in this compromised year.
So the NBA voting, there were a few different controversies, but overall, Giannis won overwhelmingly, just as he did for the Defensive Player of the Year, which was an absolute scandal. Well, we've discussed that before. I mean, that looks more and more egregious by the day. I
Team
think
award.
a lot of people are starting to take their names off of that.
I'm standing by the team award thing. The
just-
Bucks were a good defensive
They're
team.
trying to scrub those votes as if like, you know,
Like removing
like Republicans in Florida trying to get voters off the rolls.
I was thinking like those old Russian photos where like they white out certain people from black and white prints.
It's like the cover of the Mobb Deeper back of the album. They wrote "traitor" on somebody. Oh, that was Kimone Noriega, where someone's face got blurred
Oh,
out and
yeah.
just wrote "traitor."
God, the 90s.
It's like that. All the people who betrayed us. by
Shout
voting
out to
for
John Wall.
Giannis.
Yeah.
But the voting on it was overwhelming. LeBron wasn't happy about it. Did
No,
you
he
find it objectionable that it was so overwhelming, like a lopsided win for Giannis?
Yeah, LeBron went on the record and said he respected that Giannis was the MVP this year, but he took offense that he only received, I believe, like 17 votes. It was pretty much unanimous. To me, he is right, obviously. Every year that he plays, he's the MVP. But it's a flaw in the voting system, and I was trying to figure out ways to make the voting better. There's been a lot of debate about who gets a vote through that Maria Taylor AD understandable snafu. A lot of people are questioning who actually gets votes in these all NBA teams or MVP.
Have we
things.
done a BMM count?
Oh, we should like
We gotta
538.
we got to get on that. We got to see how many BMM voters there are.
We're doing this. And your BMM, if you've gone to school, if you spent formative years in the New England area, you're BMM.
Wow, Pablo, if you're listening, Quo is calling you BMM.
Listen, some of my best friends are BMM, okay?
Same. You're a lot like Biden, who just wants to reach across the aisle, and be able to have a couple steaks in the backyard with your political rivals. I get it.
Is Pablo
decency? It's decency.
Is Pablo fucking it up from the inside? They trust him, but he's alliance. Let's put it that way.
Is he the BMM's inside man?
There's like 4 sports people I like to listen to, and Pablo's one of them. So if he's BMM, I love the BMM.
Wow, is Quo?
Are the Knicks BMM?
Would you say that Rhode Island counts as Boston vicinity?
I would say yes. I would say yes. I went to school in Rhode Island.
So if someone went to school in the area, as you just claimed, they are BMM. Am I following this correctly?
Can I get an all-star vote now? Am I going to get an all-NBA vote? I can't wait. It's going to be Jokic everywhere. Point
Your
guard,
takes
shooting
just got
guard.
so much more valuable now that you're a member, obviously, of the BMM.
Oh, my phone is blowing up. ESPN's calling me. Ben, this is my last podcast with Cookies. I'm going to SportsCenter, baby.
Can you get Cookies onto ESPN just by virtue of that you're BMM?
I heard they're going to reduce the number of votes of all NBA to 2 people, and that's me and you, buddy. We got this.
So, more importantly, has your opinion on Tatum changed in the last, minute and a half?
Well, he's only 16, but already he wants it more than anybody. Oh, where am I? Oh, was this a dream? He's better than Paul George for sure.
Quo BMM.
I did go to school in Rhode Island, and there was the Patriots were big then.
You're so BMM. Oh my goodness.
I think Tatum was 2, and I was already being like, "You're a champion Hall of Famer in the making."
So enough about this exposure of your Boston adjacent past.
By my own rules, which is funny, right? I claim the rules. And
Yeah, you made up the rules and just put yourself in the BMM. I see what you're doing.
It's like when Cheney had that documentary on Showtime where it's like, maybe I did make some mistakes. I'm fly fishing right now.
Look, it's hard to be a stat hog. So I think there was a reasonable case for LeBron, although I am 100% fine with Giannis winning it, and I don't think it's ironclad. And I don't know if there's a better way of doing the voting, but I also do think it is not reflective of how close this should have been. Just for the record, that
Right.
I don't know if there is a way to improve it, but LeBron James should have lost in a close vote, in my opinion.
This is how Nate Silver got famous, right? I believe I forget which election year, he had picked almost correctly every seat that was that was on the edge of going left or right. And he had picked them all. And it was a discussion about math more than it was guessing the right candidate. And what he described was in every close battle, he could pick the winner. So it was close, but it was incorrect to say it could have gone either way.
I think that's reflective of this, that I 100% assumed that Giannis would win it. And being the way that ballots shake out, I am not surprised how it happened either. But let's give LeBron the credit he deserves, because LeBron is a better basketball player than Giannis. And I know that's not what the definition of the award is, but it's worth mentioning. He's better player.
And unfortunately,
He also, sorry, let me just
My bad.
shout out LeBron James, because no one's given this guy credit yet. This LeBron character, no one will acknowledge this guy. This guy's a baller. He's a true baller.
No one says this, but
it is worth mentioning. Despite that voting, Lakers had a similar record, not quite as good, but they played a much harder schedule. The Bucks' schedule was not hard at all. But here's the real thing: if you take away those bullshit defensive metrics, which we know are bullshit and we know are
defensive
embarrassing,
rebounds are annoying.
we take away the defensive stuff. You go to the advanced metrics; they're basically the same. Just offensively. And you're like, well, okay, so what exactly is Giannis's advantage here? Do we really think Giannis is a better defender than LeBron? I don't. Do we think he's a better rebounder than LeBron? Maybe, but who cares? So what are we talking about here? They're scoring? Okay, LeBron scores a lot too. And LeBron led the league in assists. So what exactly is our argument that makes Giannis better? He was a bit more efficient, scored more per 36 versus the guy who led the NBA in assists? I don't know. I just don't see this as a cut and dry. Giannis is absolutely deservedly better than LeBron was this year. I get it if we look at the surrounding cast on the Bucks, and that system only works because of him, but that's not LeBron's fault.
No, I don't want to look at teammates anymore when we discuss these things, but I think people are really questioning this MVP voting because of a dumb reason. It's because LeBron is still alive in the playoffs and Giannis isn't. Giannis went out in an ugly way. But that shouldn't factor into the way we do this award. And I was thinking maybe I've always played around with the idea instead of getting one vote for president, we got 4 votes. And we could divvy up the votes like shares. And that's not going to work because people get emotional and it's going to curve it to the wrong way. But another point is I was checking out Basketball Reference and their BPM 2. They reworked everything to favor their guys like Larry Bird, Jason Tatum, Michael Jordan. I just looked recently after updating all this season stats. LeBron is creeping up to all of Jordan's stats and is ahead of him in a lot of other ones. Are they going to have to reconfigure this a third time? Because we're now talking about BPMs that are a difference of 1 or less than 1. And all these advanced metrics that some nerds, and I think we have to split up the nerd table a little bit because not all nerds are created equal. And some of them are tiny and green and have tiny green hands. I think LeBron James, I do want him to win this bub because we just have to hammer home the chaotic take that there is no one we've ever seen close to this guy.
One thing that's been interesting about the rise of metrics as a sort of understandable and accepted part of the dialogue, which it really was not even 5 years ago.
Agreed.
No one would bring up BPM or PIPM or per. No one brought that stuff up. No one mentioned true shooting percentage. It wasn't part of the dialogue about
defensive rating per 100 for sure.
Never mentioned when it was about who was MVP. Those would get talked about amongst sort of the underclass, about the specific nerds, but it wasn't part of a larger debate. And I think to some degree there was a victory by the nerds of getting those into the mainstream conversation.
Sure.
And it makes sense because, what separated the conventional, highly boomer basketball analysts who just talked about people wanting it more was the rise of writers who would mention these numbers and show a larger command of statistics and play calling that moved away from sort of emotional and sort of stylistic quibbles about players. Oh, he's not a leader. Now it's more like, well, look at the team's offensive rating when he's on the court. And that's become part of the dialogue. And I really do think that was why Giannis had such a consensus to some degree, in that people who are influential in determining, where we go with voting and loud voices did embrace those kind of numbers and get them out there. Mm-hmm. So I think it's an interesting point where we have not seen metrics have this kind of impact where, when they were putting up Defensive Player of the Year tweets, the Bucks organization was mentioning defensive BPM, defensive rating, defensive this, field goal shots, defended. And it was very much part of this sort of debate. I think that's new, and it's not bad, but I think it did lead to part of the reason that Giannis so overwhelmingly beat LeBron.
The best grill masters in America are adaptable. They can cook you a hog in rain, snow, sleet, a beautiful day. It doesn't matter. This year, I think, is revenge of the boomers, man. Not only are we going to get a Los Angeles Lakers Anthony Davis finals championship
against the Celtics, maybe?
Come on, Jimmy. Come on, James.
I know.
Come on, Bam. Tyler Herro. I'm a day one Duncan Robinson guy, so to see him fail would just be shocking because he succeeded in every level of the sport.
You've always believed in him.
Always. I watched Malcolm in the Middle where he cut his teeth? I don't know. So I think this is revenge of the boomers in that they have plucked certain songs and tunes and melodies from the trough of
the stat hog
and analytics, right? Instead of being like they didn't want it enough, now they say the spacing was poor. They won because their spacing was better, which is like, it doesn't mean anything.
Well, it's the shifting of the verbiage that surrounds conventional wisdom. And you can't get away with just saying, well, this guy's a pussy. No, he doesn't want it enough. Everyone's like, yeah. Come on, we've been reading, quality writers. We've been addressing this. We have access to the NBA.com stats. You can't run, he doesn't want it enough by us. And it be, particularly credible for a lot of the basketball audience. But if you embrace the conventional wisdom of today and say, well, they don't have enough shooting, the spacing is wrong, they're not aggressive enough. There's all these words that you can use that make you sound like you're a contemporary basketball fan, that you know what's going on and it's part of a larger dialogue, but don't actually reveal anything. Mm-hmm. And you don't have to really understand the game at all. You have to say, oh, the play calling was bad, the rotations were bad. They were doing it all wrong. They didn't space the floor correctly. And you don't actually have to have a grasp of basketball in any real sense, just as you never did to say a player doesn't want it enough.
And I think that gap is getting smaller. When I talk to political thinkers and writers and analysts, they blow my mind. I cannot name every representative in America, and they can't. It's a different level. Obviously, I'm a tourist everywhere in life, but I saw this kind of play out pre-game before Game 3 in the Eastern Series. Jay Williams, who is turning into a pretty awesome troll, was breaking down a 2-3 zone. And he was like, this is why the Celtics weren't succeeding. Tatum is not shifting. Brown is not shifting. Kemba is standing in the wrong spot and touching everything. And it was very rudimentary, but still nice to see some strategy being talked about. I thought he was kind of a little too vague about it. And then they cut to Jalen Rose, who was like, without getting into the weeds, I respectfully agree and disagree with you. And he started talking about where off-ball people defensively were standing in that 2-3 zone and why that worked for the Miami Heat. And it was like a joy to hear him just with those nuggets, because all these guys are so fluent in this language, but they deliver a tune that will get stuck in our head. But when tasked, they could break down the game like no one else.
And I think that's what is sort of frustrating about current basketball dialogue, is that there's not enough of that kind of information that I think is digestible and would be really valuable, but there's too much of whistling these same melodies that are just regurgitations of the arguments that we've left in the past. You know, I think from players, fans, organizations, coaches, the last 10 years, we've seen this incredible shift towards progressive basketball, but that doesn't mean there isn't a fat part of groupthink that is still the current conventional wisdom. Conventional wisdom is still there. It's just moved along with everything else. And what used to be conventional wisdom is now at the far outlier end, where you say, I don't know, you need a garden protector to punch someone in the face. And like, you know, that was probably conventional wisdom in 1993. But it's now been diminished as conventional wisdom now is, well, you got to have 4 shooters on the court.
Yeah. Which is a progression, right? We have moved the discussion, and, you know, we are who we are. You know, if you're a turtle in the Senate, you will remain a turtle. And I think that was my Mitch McConnell dig, if you caught that, Ben.
Money, Mitch.
And the BMM will behave like the BMM. And I think boomers will grasp on to what works for them. And like you're saying, you have to have 4 shooters on the court. The spacing is wrong. You need to keep the defense honest. Those are the equivalent of, like, you need to knuckle down and get your hands, or say it with your chest. You know, all these isms. And there is a nerd influence that is undeniable here.
But it's also just basketball itself. The game has shifted, and to be stuck rigidly in the values of the 90s has become less and less defendable and less appealing. And people who still believe that are fucking old.
Yeah, the 90s, basketball-wise, were trash, man. Like, that was, compared to what we have now, it's not really a comparable product. Michael Jordan is falling far in my rankings, maybe 17 or 18 at this point.
He's now behind Jason Tatum, according to Andrew Kuo. Member day one from the BMM.
So Paul Pierce, Antoine Walker,
Eric Montross, highly underrated.
yep.
Dino Raja, early, formative, influential player. Imagine him today. Imagine Raja in today's league. Incredible.
Luke Ridnour would just demolish it. So, will Shaq go into the Hall of Fame as a Celtic?
Oh, man. I think we've unveiled you as a member of the BMM.
Based on my own metric.
Hate when that happens.
Yeah, you know.
But the...
I got nothing, man. Like, tell me Stephon Marbury isn't a Celtic for life.
I'm so sick of this BMM version of you already.
Hey, man, you love it. You love that fiddle. That
But
bagpipe.
yeah, thinking about these stats, the way that we view things, I've recently come to the conclusion that we have to stop caring about rebounds, that they are utterly irrelevant. I don't want to hear how many rebounds someone had. I just don't care anymore. It's like not a part of basketball anymore.
I 1,000% agree, man. It was exposed during Russell Westbrook's first triple-double year, where you could see his teammates pulling for him, but manufacturing defensive rebounds for him. Awesome, cool. It's a part of the game, but I just don't hold it in high regard anymore.
But also, now we see not only Westbrook being sort of a forerunner of that theory. The Mavs do it with Doncic.
The
Bucks
Bucks do it
did it
with-
with Giannis.
Yep.
And, the Celtics, to an extent, do it with Tatum when they moved him to the 4. And you see, oh, wow, this guy's rebounding great now. Like, no, they're not. They're not doing anything different. They're just scooping up the ball. Teams take more threes. Very few teams crash the boards aggressively on offense. Big men box out the opposing center. Half the time, the opposing center is on the perimeter anyway. I just don't care about rebounding anymore. When you look at somebody like, well, yeah, but they averaged 10 rebounds. Don't care, man. Just completely unimpressive.
Yeah, I want more like soccer stats. I want, effective dribbles. How many dribbles does it take for you to net the most points? Stuff like that is fascinating to me. Pulling down defensive rebounds and boxing out is not that interesting. Although, a player who rebounds in a heavy volume has value. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying I have maybe shifted my concerns away from that stat.
Well, my issue is that strategically guided rebounds, like Doncic, they want him to get rebounds. Their big guys box out. Doncic crashes the boards so that he can get the ball and get it up the court in a hurry. It's not even necessarily to start breaks. It's just to get the ball up the court faster, have more time to operate in the half-court offense.
Yeah.
Or maybe you do get to score in transition against a scrambling defense. But overall, it's a way to cut a couple seconds off the shot clock from a big guy getting it, turning, flipping it to your guy who now starts jogging up the court.
And I think we misconstrue this with a team like Houston getting defeated by a better team. It's not because they weren't rebounding. It's because they weren't shooting well. They lost Danuel House Jr. because his priorities were correct. And that shifted the whole
He
series.
accurately valued Horny.
Yeah. In the tradition of Knicks legend Keith Van Horney, Danuel House represented the NBA the proper way.
But yeah, I think there are guys who are great rebounders, for sure. We know who they are. But at this point, there are so many guys who play a lot of minutes, who are schematically, boosting their numbers, that we can't tell the difference between them, so we have to stop caring. Unless we're going to talk about contested rebounds or rebounds in the area. I don't even know how you would do it. We know someone like Gobert is a great rebounder. We know Hassan Whiteside or DeAndre Jordan. Those guys just glommed up boards. Embiid, great rebounder. They're huge. They take up 10 square feet. They have long arms. They just gobble up everything around them. Is Doncic a good rebounder? No, not really. I mean, he's okay. I don't know. I think when you look at that and say, well, he's a good rebounder, there's just no evidence based on your rebounds per game at this point.
I mean, I remember when Kevin Love was in Minnesota and he was gobbling up all those rebounds, and there was chatter that there were hollow actions on the court. I think maybe Gorgie Deng was doing the tough work, and he was on the ground when Kevin Love would gobble up those rebounds, which is valuable. We're seeing a player like Anthony Davis kind of accrue his swinely stats, but also, he's getting those rebounds. Whatever, rebounds are valuable. Possession is everything. And when he creates possessions for the Lakers, I'm not frowning upon that. But as a standalone metric, it's very noisy, right?
I just think you look at the per game leaders, and look, Drummond, Gobert, Whiteside, Sabonis, Kevin Love, Vucevic, Valanciunas, Doncic, just a bunch of burly white guys.
Say his name again.
Doncic?
No, before Valanciunas.
Valanciunas?
I love it. I fucking love it.
I can't pronounce anything. That's my one flaw.
That's your only flaw.
Wow, that is incredible. Like, just white dudes really holding it down. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 in the league. 11, 12. Oh, white guys have found their place to shine. I take it all back. Rebounding is what matters.
That Cherokee Parks energy, man.
But yeah, Giannis led the league, and Doncic was 9th. And neither one of those guys is like an elite rebounder. They're both guys who accumulate opportunities and take advantage of them. I don't know. I just don't care about it, man. Someone's got to get it.
So
you have a big guy who sits around in the paint, they're going to get a lot of rebounds.
So I took the bait on one of these Twitter comparisons. The career Yao Ming versus Ben Wallace. Tasty, right? So tasty. Ben Wallace, one of my favorite players of all time. Yao Ming, also one of my favorite players of all time. To me, it was a disservice to Yao because I personally have Yao in a tier far away from Ben Wallace. I thought Yao was a product of his era, but was almost had no weaknesses as a center. Didn't pass that much, but could have passed. Didn't shoot threes because they weren't asking him to shoot threes, but maybe could have because he had a really great true shooting percentage everywhere else. But and Ben Wallace is just amazing. Just a tenacious defender. Maybe not a basketball genius, but maybe was a defensive basketball genius. So the debate was awesome to me. It took ugly tones, though, to me. But
Why was that?
I kind of thought it was racist, man. I gotta say.
Go on, my Asian king.
I was like, oh, I love this debate. Let's see how many, let's see the 50-50 debate. But it ended up being like 100% Ben Wallace. Everyone's like, Ben dominates, Yao's trash. Ben is an all-star in 2020. Yao Ming doesn't even make a team. And it was just like very heavily in the favor of, to me, an inferior player. And I don't want to read stats on radio, but Yao Ming career 3.2 BPM, Ben Wallace 2.5. Yao was a good defender and a good offensive player. Ben Wallace was kind of an offensive problem, not in a good way. He shot 40% from the free throw line. And I don't, in the way that Michael Jordan can't be the best player of all time because he quit on his team, it's hard to make a case for Ben Wallace when you shoot that poorly. And Yao Ming shoots that well, and they're both pretty good defenders. Ben Wallace is a superior defender. But to me, it rang a little bit like it's hard to side with an Asian man. It's not that cool, man. And
I hate it. I hate siding with an Asian man. I like to argue with an Asian man.
Well, you come into every Cookies episode being like, I'm gonna slam and jam on this Asian man.
Man, I had a friend who went to an Ivy League school, and they said they used to keep track of DOAs, dunks on Asians.
Hey, Yao Ming, try to dunk on Yao Ming, man. Tell me how that goes.
He wasn't out there.
Okay, so who was he playing against?
These were short kings.
Wang Zhuzhu, Yi Jianlan.
I think Ben Wallace is a better defensive player than Yao Ming was.
For sure.
Ben Wallace, to me, is a basketball genius on the defensive side. He is brilliant. One of the best defensive players I think we've ever seen.
Was he a product of an era? Like, is he Draymond Green good?
Well, what's interesting about this comparison is they both played in the same era, which is unique because a lot of times when we have these discussions, things change a lot. And that's where I think Ben Wallace does get a bad rap from some people because he played at a time when there was not much efficiency expected from anyone, let alone from a center.
But who does Ben Wallace get a bad rap from?
Well, I mean, when we talk about his offense.
Oh, okay.
Because he was making all-star teams averaging 7 points a game.
Also,
And
as a
he
big
wasn't-
shooting below 50%.
Right. So I think those are valid, but due to that era, early 2000s, everyone was inefficient. And because he didn't shoot that much, he doesn't actually hurt your team overall in the way that a volume scorer who is inefficient would. But he also doesn't contribute that much on that side of the ball. But I do think Ben Wallace is a basketball genius. He's one of the best defensive players of all time. And I think he does get overrated he does get underrated because people generally don't care about defense that much. That said, Yao Ming averaged like 25 points a couple years. Yao Ming made 8 consecutive All-Star games. He did have voting on his side, apparently. But 8 consecutive All-Star games, without his foot injury, I think he probably is a Hall of Fame player. If he's not a is he in the Hall of Fame?
I think he is, but like the criteria for the Hall of Fame in the NBA is weird. It's like cultural impact too, right?
Well, it's also
Yeah, he's in the Hall of Fame.
it's also amateur basketball too.
Yeah, and
So
him
it's
just being an
international,
ambassador.
amateur. Yeah. So totally valid. I guess my point was more saying the perception of him as a very good player or a good player is sculpted in part because he had so many injuries. Like, he was really awesome. He was a good defensive player. He was enormous. He scored a lot. And I'm with you. I think he probably could have shot threes. I think he could have been a better passer especially if he was up at the top of the key. We know he was a pretty good jump shooter, in the 80s as a free throw shooter. I don't know. I think they're both underrated players, and I like them a lot.
Yeah.
And I think Wallace gets the advantage because he was on a championship team, and the Rockets with McGrady and Yao Ming are always viewed as underachieving a bit, largely because of injury.
Yep.
But it's hard to look at Yao Ming, who put up, there was a couple year period here where from 25 to 27, he averaged 23 and 10, 2 blocks a game. Like, he was a beast.
Yeah, and it's like a flaw in our memory because I think Ben Wallace, to most people, is the more memorable player. He's cool. He won a championship, and I got into a little friendly debate with somebody who claimed that he was the best player on those Pistons championship teams, which I thought was just the crux of the problem with the debate, because Chauncey Billups and Rasheed Wallace not only were eyeball test the best players on that team, but statistically the best players on that team.
See, I disagree. I think it was Ben Wallace, but rock on.
Yeah, to me, those two players are just apex talents, and they won the champion. I mean, I love Ben Wallace. I can't believe I got tricked into.
But this is where I would argue about the era, because these were the lowest scoring teams in history. These were, the pace was trash. They had to put in rules to change the NBA because people hated it. And when they went against the Spurs in the finals, those were the two best defensive ratings in NBA history on the court. Spurs actually were better than them. But I think Ben Wallace, in that era, when it was all about paint protection because no one could shoot yet, and having the best paint protector, other than maybe Tim Duncan, but, those were the guys. I think that Ben Wallace was of outsized importance due to the fact that this was 2002, 2003, 2004, and that he does not look good in comparison to the centers of today because of his inefficiency, because of his lack of scoring, because of his lack of shooting, because he was undersized. But in 2002, you could put anyone around Ben Wallace, and he just would catch wreck.
And I agree. I love Ben Wallace, but the opposite of that point would be that was such an inferior offensive era where all Ben Wallace had to do is watch these guys take poor shots and like ISO, back away, fade away, Tatum-esque stuff. And I think Ben Wallace, maybe, we just talked about rebounding. He benefited a lot from volume rebounding.
Yeah, it was a great rebounder. But I think that's sort of in the best defensive era of all time, when it had outside value, outlier value, having the defensive player of the year on your team was really critical. Just as today, you could make the argument that someone like Steph Curry was most important to have when all of a sudden it's about pace and space and moving the ball and shooting threes.
Well,
that Curry is the ultimate weapon now, and back then, for this brief period of time, it was more important to have someone like Ben Wallace than even having like Tracy McGrady, who was a better player, of course.
I remember one of the first debates me and you ever had. I said something pretty scandalous, but I still stand behind it, that defense doesn't matter. And
but back then it did, Quo. Now it sort of matters. Back then it really mattered.
Yeah. And what I meant then, I think, was the best defense, like the Grizzlies, or the defensive player of the year, has less impact on the court than an equal and opposite offensive player. And I think of Tyson Chandler, who won the defensive player of the year on the Knicks that one good year with Carmelo Anthony. Carmelo Anthony was a more important and better player on that team. Tyson Chandler, I'm a Tyson Chandler guy. He gets into the Hall of Fame. He is a basketball genius for sure. He kind of wrote the Draymond Green blueprint. But it's Carmelo Anthony, and there's a ripple effect in a game and on a team that allows someone like Giannis Antetokounmpo to lead his team in rebounding, and Russell Westbrook to gather 10 rebounds a game, which is crazy. And I think I love Ben Wallace, and I think he deserves all the accolades, but at the expense of a better player is funny, right? Because we're dealing with a noisy discussion. We're valuing blue collar work here. Defender. He didn't care about the flashy stuff like scoring points. Like, all right, that's fair. Yao Ming was a prolific scorer, but total rebounds in their career, Ben Wallace averaged 9.6 and Yao averaged 9.2. Like, there isn't a big discrepancy there. Career BPM.
Well, that's also because Ben Wallace didn't just end his career like while in his prime.
Exactly. Totally. So if you take like the snapshot, a Morse code of their best years, sure, in a moment, Ben Wallace might be better. But don't we have to equate what players they were? Like, oh, he declined. I'm like, but then he declined. That's as fair as saying Yao Ming got hurt a lot, which is fair.
I don't think it's hard to say that Yao Ming had a better career or at his peak was better than Ben Wallace. I also do think that, to the point about Ben Wallace being the most important kind of player in the early 2000s, you could also make the argument that having a center like Yao Ming, who was efficient even by modern standards, made him particularly valuable as an offensive tool in an era when most centers not only were not great scorers, but were not efficient ones almost ever. So when the league average for efficiency is in the low 50s and your center is scoring at a 60% true shooting percentage, that's a huge competitive advantage. And I think that's a point that gets notched to Yao Ming that we don't really think about.
Yeah. And I think the game has evolved towards what Yao represented, and it's easier to understand that. Where Ben Wallace's skill set, amazing, but it feels, if you are in the psychology of thinking today's game is soft, Ben Wallace is your guy, and that's kind of what I saw on Twitter.
I believe it. One thing that's been interesting about the center position is how uninteresting it has become for the most part. And excluding the stars, the Embiids and the Jokic's.
How did Embiid not make an all-NBA team, by the way? Anyway, go off.
I don't even know who the other centers were on it. I mean,
he's better than Gobert to me, but whatever.
Of course he is.
Yeah.
I mean, of course he is.
Yeah.
Like, what are we even talking about? Gobert might be a little bit better defensively, but Embiid averages like 22 points a game.
This is the Yao Ben Wallace thing I have going. Go on.
But what I was going to say is, with the exclusion really of Embiid and Jokic as guys who are unique talents and top 10 players, whatever.
You love Jokic.
The center position has become pretty boring. It's almost all efficient rim runners, rim protectors, and then half of them can shoot threes and stand on the perimeter, and the other ones just kind of stay in the dunker spot or run the floor or look for a lob. It's a really bland position right now.
I agree, man. I think this is a good thing. I think this is it makes for a better thing to watch. It makes for a more interesting strategical game.
Wait, what, the homogeny of centers?
No, kind of excluding centers from like the game moving forward, or devaluing that position moving forward. Like James Wiseman, not to get into the KBB, in the aughts or in the 90s would be a bona fide number one pick, but he might fall to like 2, 3, 4, 5 at this point. And he's in the mold of some of the great players of that era. The effect of Draymond Green, I think, is, however overrated, is still underrated.
You're speaking, of course, to the Golden State Warriors, Hamptons 5, going to the lineup of death with Draymond at center, right? And who is much smaller than the conventional center, but able to uniquely defend big guys in the way that we saw with the Rockets, with guys like PJ Tucker or Covington being able to at least hold their own against guys who are a lot larger.
Yeah. Again, but if you can get Yao Ming on your team, that's trouble, right? Like, no one wants to play a center who is smart, who can shoot well, and doesn't hurt his team anywhere. Like that is the unicorn we're looking for. That's what we thought Porzingis would be.
We're going to get these adjustments and, valleys and peaks in the importance of positions. And this makes sense for center, right? Because you go back maybe 7 years ago, there was a little more diversity within the center position. And now people have kind of realized having a rim protector is vital. That's kind of all they need to be able to do, except to be also mobile enough you can't immediately play them off the court. You can't just get them in an ISO and destroy them every single time and then have to put them on the bench. So they've all kind of become somewhat similar. And the ones who aren't as good defensively make up for it by being, say, shooters. But all this said, this will change because offenses are changing. Once you have the market saturation of rim protecting centers, teams will figure out how to build offenses to thwart that. Okay, we're going to take more threes. We're going to drag them on the perimeter. We're going to have our center stand outside and shoot. So I think this is only a temporary situation. It's going to adjust again. And you'll always have an advantage with these outlier types. But what's an outlier might change. Tyson Chandler was kind of an outlier. People thought he wasn't talented. Oh, he can't shoot. He doesn't have a hook shot.
Drafted
No, he's
2 overall.
awesome
Yeah.
because he's the most efficient scorer of all time and plays great defense and protects the rim. And he catches lobs and he does vertical spacing. And then that became kind of the archetype. But when he was on the Knicks, people underrated him all the time
Yeah.
offensively because they didn't get what he was bringing to the table. So I think the center's gotten a little bit dull. At the same time, the power forward, which was kind of stuck in limbo for a little while, is now really interesting because you have straight up stretch fours, you have small ball fours, you have Anthony Davises, you have Jeremy Grant 3-and-D guys. So the power forward position, I think, which kind of got dull, is now really exciting. And I think that's where the market inefficiencies will come. Power forward position, and then when the center position evolves for like another time.
Yeah, and that's why I hold a player like Rasheed Wallace on the Pistons in such high regard, because I think he was a predictive kind of prototype for what we're seeing, what we want from the power forward position. And he was so good on those championship teams. And he deferred a lot stats-wise. He was the opposite of a stat hog. But I think he was a genius on the court. But this discussion kind of reminds me of that article you wrote for The Ringer about Nurkic. And I remember us talking about it. And a lot of this is kind of based off of personnel and who the league has in it at the time, who comes into the league through draft, through free agency, and the shift is always, to me, a personnel issue rather than a philosophical one.
Yeah, people will ask me, oh, well, how do you like Joel Embiid so much? Why are you into a post-up player?
What? How can you not love him?
But no, when, offensively, when
Yeah.
we always talk about progressive basketball, like, but
Sure.
how do you like Joel Embiid? Because he's a post player.
Yeah.
Because he's an anomaly.
Yeah,
Because he is uniquely good at a skill that most teams are not equipped to defend against.
Yes.
So if Ben Simmons plays against the Celtics, I think the Sixers beat them in the first round because they did not have an answer for Joel Embiid. He was awesome in that series, but they just didn't have enough talent without Simmons there to create shots, to defend Tatum, etc. But that's why Philly beat the Celtics 3 out of 4 times this year. They had no answer for Embiid whatsoever. None. And that's in the spirit of styles make fights. Having a guy like Joel Embiid can just beat your team. Okay, all right, here come, I don't know, the Heat. Don't have anyone who can guard Joel Embiid. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Like, you're screwed. So I think there is always going to be an advantage to having someone who's really good at something, even if they aren't necessarily fitting under the prototype of what we view modern basketball is, because modern basketball always changes.
And that's why I don't care about, I've opted out of hypocrisy, kind of, in basketball especially, because, right, sometimes people ask me, well, you guys spent all this time talking up value of shots and the three-pointer, but you love Ben Simmons? I'm like, yeah, because he does something on an extraordinary level that makes everything work around him. He is a once-in-a-decade kind of player. And he doesn't do that one thing that I love, which is efficient scoring and valuable shooting. But it doesn't matter because
he's efficient. You just mean shooting.
3-point. He doesn't take the mathematically valuable 3-point shot. The free throw is more valuable than anything, and the dunk. But I remember one of my friends saying, like, "Well, to your point, then everyone should just dunk all the time." I'm like, "Yes, that is
absolutely that's the dream offense."
Yes, 5 Mitchell Robinsons, just do that.
And also, that's what the Rockets are actually doing. The Rockets are trying to get free throws, dunks, and layups. That's the offense. It's not shoot a lot of threes. It's dunks, free throws, layups, and then the only bad shots you take are threes. Oh, that's what their offense actually is. People view it as avoiding mid-range in order to take threes. It's taking threes as your worst shot.
Right.
Versus taking twos as your worst shot. Their good shots are James Harden getting fouled.
Yes. Yeah, totally. And that is, God, watching the Rockets players like Jeff Green remind himself of coaching as he pulls up for a long 2 and then dribbles 2 feet to be behind the line. It's so interesting to see players kind of not being themselves on the court to the benefit of the offense. It's interesting, but I agree. Like if you want to win games, just think about what Daryl Morey has done and apply it to your personnel and acquire personnel to support your theory. That's all you have to do, kind of.
I mean, that's why I'm intrigued by the idea of D'Antoni coaching Philly, just because they have guys whose instincts are so like diametrically opposed to what he believes. I want to see if he can sort this out.
That's all I want. The season is over to me. Like, whatever, give it to LeBron. AD, cool. Kobe's awesome. Rest in peace, Kobe. We miss him. Like, let's do all this stuff, and let's get to D'Antoni on the Sixers and the fucking draft. Let's go.
I agree. And let's just get to more perfect pods.
Well, since we're always in the perfect pod state, in the perfect pod moment, getting to another one should be no problem.
I love cookies. I love cookies.
Cookies.
I love cookies. I love cookies.